All right, let's dive into a 2,000-year-old puzzle from one of the most influential letters ever written, the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. He makes this revolutionary claim about grace, but it immediately raises a really, really dangerous question.
So Paul kicks off chapter 6 with this absolute bombshell of a question. See, he just spent chapters explaining that where sin is a problem, God's grace is an even bigger solution. So the logical follow-up, if you're a bit mischievous, is, well, why not sin more so we can get more grace? It's a question that honestly seems to threaten his entire message.
And his response is instant. It's sharp. By no means, you could translate that as no way or absolutely not. But then he follows it up with this really mysterious statement: we died to sin. Now hold on. What on earth does it mean for a living, breathing person to be dead to sin? That's the code we're here to crack. To solve this, we can't just stare at the words on the page. We actually have to zoom out and understand the world Paul was writing to. This isn't some abstract philosophy paper. It's a real letter to a real community facing some very real problems in the heart of the Roman Empire. You can see the drama right here in the timeline. Just a few years before Paul writes, the Emperor Claudius kicks all the Jewish people out of Rome. This included the Jewish Christians who had helped start the church there. Well, a few years later, Claudius dies, and they're allowed to come back. But imagine returning home after years away to find that everything has changed. The church is now mostly non-Jewish or Gentile. That's the tense, divided community Paul is writing to.
So Paul has a pretty clear agenda with this letter. One, he wants to use Rome as a sort of home base for a future mission to Spain. Two, he needs to carefully explain his core message to a church that's only heard rumors about him. And three, and this is a big one, he desperately wants to heal the division between the Jewish and Gentile believers. For him, unity is absolutely key.
To do all this, he uses a popular teaching tool from his day called the diatribe. He basically sets up a debate with an imaginary opponent in his writing. He'll raise the strongest possible objection to his own argument, and then he'll systematically take it apart. It's a really smart way to make his case stronger. And that question, should we go on sinning? Yeah, that's a classic diatribe move. He's beating his critics to the punch.
Okay, so the scene is set. Let's get back to that central clue Paul gives us to unlock this whole idea of being dead to sin. He gives us this framework for understanding, well, all of human history.
Paul basically tells history as a tale of two representative figures, Adam and Christ. You can think of them as heads of two different humanities. Adam represents the old era, an age that's completely ruled by these twin powers of sin and death. But Christ comes and launches a totally new era, a new humanity that's defined by righteousness and life. These are like two separate kingdoms, two totally different realities.
So how do you get from one kingdom to the other? Paul's logic here is pretty stark. You can't just decide to move. The only way to be released from the authority and the power of that old era under Adam is to die. Death is the only exit. But hang on, Paul is writing to people who are alive, so how have they died? He points to baptism. For Paul, baptism isn't just some religious ritual. It's this profound symbol of participation in Christ's own journey. It's where a believer is spiritually united with Jesus in his death, buried with him, and then, crucially, raised with him into this brand new life, this new reality. So what does this symbolic death and resurrection actually accomplish in our daily lives? Well, it's not about magically becoming perfect. It's about a fundamental shift in who holds power over you. It's a complete change of allegiance. Now, this is so important. When Paul uses the word sin here with a capital S, he's not just talking about individual mess-ups. He's personifying sin as a hostile power, like a tyrannical king that rules over the old humanity and holds it in slavery. So who were you when you lived under that tyrant? Paul calls that your old self. And again, this isn't just your bad habits. It's the entire you, your whole being, as it existed under the rule of King Sin. And Paul's radical claim is that this old self was crucified. It was put to death right there with Christ. And here's where it all clicks. Death breaks a slave's obligation to their master. It's a legal principle. If you've died, you're free. So by participating in Christ's death, you have been legally and spiritually set free from the tyrant sin. Its claim over you is broken. Okay, but this brings us to the final and maybe the most practical piece of the puzzle. If believers are truly, actually free from sin's power, why does Paul still have to command them how to act? If you're free, right? The answer lies in this really powerful idea that theologians call the already and the not yet.
The thinking is that with Jesus, the new age has already broken into our world. But the old age hasn't been fully wiped out yet, so Christians live in this overlap, this tension between a new reality that has definitely started and its final completion that is still on its way.
And Paul's argument perfectly balances this tension. He starts with what grammarians call the indicative. These are just statements of fact, what is true. He says, you have died to sin. You have been freed. These are presented as done deals. And then, based on that reality, he gives the imperative, which is the command. Count yourselves dead to sin. Do not let sin reign.
And this is the genius of it. The command isn't telling you to pretend something is true. The command is possible because it's grounded in a reality that has already been accomplished for you. You're being commanded to start acting like the person you already are in Christ.
So let's pull all these threads together. Paul's answer to that shocking question at the beginning, should we sin more, is a profound, powerful, multi-layered no.
Continuing to sin would be completely absurd because your entire identity, your allegiance, has changed. You've died to the old tyrant, sin. You've been transferred to a new kingdom. That freedom is your new reality. That's the already. But you now have to consciously, daily, choose to live out that freedom. That's the not yet. So you see, grace isn't a permission slip to go on sinning. Grace is the very power that breaks the chains and frees you from sin.
And Paul's 2,000-year-old argument isn't just some dusty theological idea. It leaves us all with a critical question for our own lives. If we have truly been set free from a tyrant's power and given a new life, what does it actually look like to live that out, right here and right now?